So you guys, I just put my hand in my pocket, and guess what I pulled out? A baby Jesus. So he is with me. I'm just going to put him right there. It's my nieces. They're all over my sister's house, and so baby Jesus is with us, right? Actually, this isn't a baby Jesus. This is like King and Glory Jesus, but he's a tiny little guy. Okay, so I do have the privilege of speaking about trading comfort for calling and a creative's path to purpose. Wasn't Rachel amazing? She literally was amazing. Yes. I didn't catch all of it, but the parts that I caught, I was like, oh, I want to write now. This is amazing. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, in case you don't know me, I'm married to my husband right here, Ben Voran. We've been married 20 years, you guys. We just crossed over into 2 decades. 2 decades, yes. We have 6 kids. Our oldest is 19 and our youngest is 10. And so life in the Voran home is very, very busy. In fact, I just want to say it's like more than busy. It's called chaotic, okay? And we have 7 chickens and 2 dogs. So our house is kind of also a circus. The kids bring the chickens in the house. I scream, and then the kids take the chicken out of the house, okay? So there's like a constant running door of, I don't know all the things. Recently, my husband and I started a podcast called Our One Blessed Mess. Thank you, cheering squad. I love this. We kicked fear in the butt and took it on, and we are talking about all things family. We're talking about marriage. We're talking about life. Our acronym, now my husband says it's O1BM, but I like to say our 1BM. Nobody laughed. I think that's hilarious. Okay, thank you. Somebody laughed. Okay. Yes, thank you. Get it now, our 1BM, because literally it's a blessed mess, but it's also a blessed something else too. Okay, so y'all check it out and follow us. We are on all places that you listen to podcasts. We're also on YouTube, and so if you want to get the visual. Oh, the website is ouroneblessedmess.com, so you can go there and find it. All right, so I'm excited about today's topic because this is something that I've been walking through for the last year, and when Justin asked me to speak on this, I thought, wow, he's really pushing me in that position of risk. And I know that today, as I'm speaking, whether you're here in the room or you're watching online, something is going to resonate in your heart and resonate in your spirit, because I believe I'm not the only one that's walking through this. I believe the Lord has other creatives walking through this, and you may be on a different path in the journey, on your pathway to purpose, but I know that God is doing a new thing in all of us. And so, do you know that feeling when God's calling you to something, but it means stepping away from everything comfortable and familiar? Anybody have that? You know that feeling? Okay, that's exactly, literally where I found myself last year. I was facing a decision that honestly seemed pretty foolish by the world standards. In fact, I closed a chapter of my life being an entrepreneur and building a business for 14 years, a 6-figure income, and closed that. I actually had worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. I was very successful in the company, the top 1%. I traveled. We did cruises. I took my family, our entire family, to Disney a couple of times. Many, many amazing things. And that decision to do that wasn't very easy. And let's be honest, it looked completely crazy, but I do know that after a lot of prayer, Ben and I, and with our pastors, and we had some close friends, it was very clear that the Lord was saying, this chapter is ending and I have something else for you to do. So it was like an entire ecosystem was getting changed, right? And I was literally walking out trading comfort for calling because our whole entire lifestyle changed. And in the process of doing that, what was happening is I was walking through transition. I didn't fully understand it at the time. I just thought it was just like an ending, but it was actually a transition. And I think it's so funny because what Rachel was just talking about, character building, I thought, well, maybe somebody can build a character off of what I'm about to share, because there's some story, there's some seriousness in there, especially as a creative. And so I want to talk about what transition is. And I also want to help give you some direction in that. It's not just change, it's process. I kind of like that word and kind of don't like that word, process. And folks, let me tell you, process is the key word here. It's all those small steps and stages that bring us from where we are to where God's leading us. And sometimes it's external, like when in 2020 COVID came and we all walked through transition, we all walked through that process, but often it's just deeply personal and internal. And so I personally recognized that I was going through this transition when I felt the Lord say to me, your assignment is over, which was really hard to take, okay? And you want to talk about being shocked. It was like a sucker punch in the gut. I thought I would be a lifer. I saw myself retiring. I saw, so many things. I thought for sure this was something that I would never stop doing. But he whispered to my heart. He said, I have other things for you. And I whispered, back to him. Actually, I screamed at him. Kinda, I'll be honest. But I have invested in this business. I've invested in people. My life is totally around this. Our money, everything is in this ecosystem of my business. And the Lord just said, yes, but I'm telling you, your assignment's done and I have something else for you to do. And he was inviting me into this journey of obedience. And he reminded me that I had done this previously when we named our daughter. In fact, he spoke to me. I was sitting in a conference, you guys. I was getting up and about to speak. This is the craziest part. I'm sitting in a conference. I'm about to get up to speak, and the Holy Spirit speaks to me, and he says, I want you to obey me. And I'm like, Lord, I'm going to obey you. He had already said, your assignment's done. And he says, I want you to obey me. And I said, okay. And he says, I want you to obey me like you named your daughter and how you obeyed naming her. So I'm going to tell the story about that. We were newly pregnant with a little girl. We have 2 boys and then a daughter. We have 4 boys and 2 girls, so she's the first girl. And, what do parents do when they find out what they're going to be having? You start looking at names, right? Right, you start looking at names. And so we start talking about names, and Ben has a name that I was never going to name, even my chicken, okay? And the name was Amore, all right? That is a beautiful name. It means love. But all I kept picturing in my mind was this beautiful, young 15, 16-year-old girl with a slew of men lining up outside her window at night singing, that's Amore. We're not doing it. So I'm kind of a spicy personality. And I like the, shut up, I heard that laugh. And so I said, okay, well, let's pray about it. Secretly thinking, I'm just going to get my way. You have no idea. And I love the names like Scarlett and Charlotte and Kathleen. And actually, I love the name Kathleen Kelly from You've Got Mail. So after that writing course, who knows, whatever you write, maybe somebody will name their child after the name that you came up in a book. So, or a story. And so anyway, he says, let's just pray about it. We prayed about the boys. We felt the Lord direct us for the names for the boys. And, okay, let's do that. Of course, in my secret heart, I'm thinking, I'm going to have my way. And so, lo and behold, the Lord gives me a dream. And in this dream, I'm walking outside. It was beautiful. It was bright. It was shiny in this dream. There was white clouds, blue sky, rolling green hills, fluffy trees, all the things. And I hear the Father thundered from heaven. And what he said to me in this dream, he said, her name is Blaze Rain. And I repeat back to him, her name is Blaze Rain. He says, yes, her name is Blaze Rain. And it went through me. And when I woke up from that dream, it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. Ben was getting ready to go to work downtown Kansas City. And I'm undone because I know I just had an encounter. And I didn't even know what to say. I actually didn't say anything. He kissed me on the forehead and left and went to work. But as I'm laying there, I'm like, I think I just heard the Father's voice. And I was just in that moment with him and what he was saying. And then later through the day, I started thinking about what he said and the name that he had for our daughter. So Ben came home from work, and I made his favorite meal and got the kids in the bath and, all the things that you do to prepare, We're sitting there on the couch, and I said, hey, I have something to tell you. I had a dream this morning, and I share it with him, and I say, what do you think? And he's like, I love it. I think it's great. I was like, okay. Then he says, what do you think? And I said, I hate it. It sounds like an American Gladiator. What if she has red hair? What if she has a temper? So all that fear was coming. I'm like, oh my gosh, people are going to make fun of us. They're going to think that she's a superhero. what are we thinking? And then I said, you have to swear that you're not going to tell anybody. And he's like, wow. I'm sure he was thinking, this is a lot. And because I'm a lot, whatever. I don't apologize. And so, in the midst of that, I was like, you can't say anything. And so it took me like 4 months, because I'm like at the 20-week mark. It took me about 4 months to get my heart right. And it was so beautiful how the Lord did that. And he really was just giving an invitation and saying, you are the parents, you name the child, but I'm speaking this over her life, and this is what I call her. And I remember I went to prenatal prayer, and we were taking communion. And they said, is there anything that you need to ask the Lord for forgiveness for before you take communion? And they were going to pray over me in the pregnancy and all the things. And the Holy Spirit just began to speak to me, and he just said, I have formed and fashioned her, and I know her future. And it was like this light bulb went on inside of me, which you guys are probably all listening going, duh, we know this, Liz. But for me, walking it out, it was like, okay, who am I to say that that is not her name? God formed and fashioned her. He knows her destiny. He knows her calling. And I'm going to say she is a very creative young lady. Like, this girl is blowing my mind. She is a true creative. We wrestled with her coming this weekend, but we'll probably bring her to a future one. But she is so like a fire and a water. She is an abundant blessing, and she's an abundant flame, all right? So you get it. There's this whole thing that's going inside of her, okay? And in the process, there was an obedience there. And so when the Lord was speaking to me and saying, I want you to obey me as you're laying down your what you think is your life calling, what is comfortable, while you're laying that down, I want you to obey me in the most gentle way, just like you obeyed me in naming Blaze Rain. Isn't that amazing? I know. I just love that about God. And so in the process, of laying it all down, it truly looked like a death to me. And it took almost a year to grieve this transition. And that is okay. We need space to grieve. Sometimes we walk through something when the Lord is taking us from a transition from one thing to another, and you need space to grieve. I will say grieve healthy, right? We need to lament healthy, but we turn to the Lord in our grief and not other things. I love what Psalms 119:71 says. Write this down because this is kind of becoming our verse right now for our family. It says, it was good for me that I was afflicted, that I might learn your statutes. That is King David who wrote that. Unbelievable. So my entire ecosystem shattered. It wasn't just like a move across the country or like switching jobs. Literally, I was laying down my entire comfort, even a financial comfort, and that I thought was my calling, and it was also laying down my identity. So you know what's amazing? God doesn't leave us guessing. Yes, transition can shake your identity for good or for bad, but there are actually clear signs when we're in transition. And why does God call us into transition? Right? As creatives, some of you are multifaceted, right? You will put your hand on one thing, and then you'll put your hand on another thing. And your life is a season of seasons, right? And I like the verse 1 Corinthians 13:11 that says, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. That was even kind of talked about at this conference. So during my transition last year of leaving my comfort for calling and being on a path to purpose, I stumbled upon this pastor by the name of Craig Cooney. He's out of Ireland. He's got this great Irish accent. He wrote a book about transition. It's a devotional. It's called The Threshold. He's absolutely anointed, and I highly recommend getting his book. It's phenomenal. It's a very thick one. It's good. It's really good. But in his book, he talks about the clear signs of knowing when we're in transition. And I'm going to share 9 of them with you because I bet some of you are going to find that these resonate in your heart and they're going to sound familiar. So number 1 is you have more capacity than you're currently using. You have more capacity than you're currently using. Personally, my business was thriving. I had impact. I had influence, but I was in a box. As a creative, being in a box is not always the greatest thing, right? There were talents that I just wasn't able to use. Like there was no space for me to use these. And I knew the path forward was very predictable. I wasn't able to use them, but I sensed that there was just more inside of me. And it's like I talked about this at the panel, it's like being a 5-talent person living a 2-talent life. Okay? You feel it, right? You felt that. So that sense that there's more inside of you wanting to be expressed. To use David as an analogy, on the inside, you're a giant killing king, but you've never stepped outside of the sheepfold. Transition is designed to bring you into a wider space where you can fully engage your capacity. Okay? Transition almost seemed like a cuss word to me last year, but I'm embracing it. Number 2, your assignment is finished. This is a sign that you're in transition and you're trading and going to your purpose, right? Anyone ever hit that point where everything like literally becomes predictable? Like you're like waking up, I see some heads nodding. Okay. When you're just going through the motions, God called you to do a particular work, and that work is now complete. That's often God's way of saying the chapter is complete. So if you keep staying there, you're going to get past your welcome, and your assignment is clearly done. Like it is over. It is finished. And if you try to hold on, man, it's like the eagles that they know that the little eaglets need to fly, and so they come and they bring sticks and stick them in the nest, and then those eaglets are uncomfortable, and then they've got to take off. That's kind of what the Lord's doing. He's like, your season's done living in the nest. You got to go, right? Number 3, you've stopped growing. As creatives, I think this is a hard one. And I think it hits a little hard because when was the last time you felt truly challenged or excited about your work? Sometimes that plateau is God's invitation to something new. Like when you're hitting a plateau, you may need to look and see He has something new for you. All healthy, living things are designed to grow physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. However, when you plateau in some area of your life, you literally will stop growing. You're stagnant. You flatline and then begin to stagnate. Like it's not good. Your life becomes too comfortable and predictable. You even become a little depressed. And I can attest to this. I believe I was in transition before I even heard the Lord say your assignment was up. I just was fighting it because I didn't want to hear it. It was like I had my hands on my ears going, I'm not listening. And He was just gently nudging, right? So you may even begin to look for stimulation and a sense of thrill in the wrong places. I mean, it could even be in addictions. Like if you're in a stagnant place and you're not growing and you're not flowing and you're not thriving, that can be substance abuse. You could be trying to find fulfillment in unhealthy relationships and unhealthy ways. But deep down you know that God has more for you. You know it. Number 4, God wants to reveal Himself in new ways. This one is absolutely beautiful, y'all. I love this. When He was taking me through the transition, He said, "You're done. You're closing your business. You're laying all that aside." And it was like people would come up to me like, "He has something beautiful for you," and I'm like, "Shut your mouth. You have no idea." I feel like I'm dying, right? But the truth is that sometimes God transitions us simply because He wants to show us a different facet of His character. Wow. There are 2 4-letter words that I really had a hard time last year with. They're not cuss words, but they were kind of cuss words to me. The first one was R-E-S-T, rest. And the other one was W-A-T, W-A-I-T, wait. That was the wrong spelling. I homeschool, don't worry. The kids are fine. But the truth is like, I kept getting that word for years. I felt like the Lord was saying, I'm bringing you into a place of resting. I'm bringing you into a place of waiting. And it was so hard to wrestle with that, right? And I didn't understand it, that He was saying that it was about this transition. And so for this last year, I literally laid everything down. When Justin had us up here for the panel that I found out about right before I walked on stage, and he said, "What do you do?" I'm sitting there going, I don't know what I do. I'm still figuring out what do I do. And that's okay. I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm a mom. I'm homeschooling. I laid down a business. We're in the middle of making a podcast. But at the same time, I'm like, He is formulating that because He's showing me a new facet of Him. So to go, like literally just to paint the picture, to go from my fast-paced life as an achiever, I'm an achiever and an activator. If you know anything about Strength Finders, those are in my top. Yes, thank you. Okay, we got some waves. I'm up there, right? So for me to do that and go through this transition, I had an ample amount of hours that were very empty and difficult. Okay, plus we have 6 kids and we have chickens and all those things, and you guys are thinking your life is so full, but for an achiever, it's not. It really isn't, and the kids are great, but they're also older, so they don't need me as much as they did when they're in their younger years. But I now, however, see that the Lord was revealing and wanting to reveal to me himself in a new way. I would not give up this last year for anything. There are things that he has done in me and he has worked in me that are the treasures that I'm going to take with me for the rest of my life until I step into eternity. So, God wants to reveal himself to you in new ways. So be open to that if you're in the midst of transition. Number 5, your current environment has become too limiting. It's like wearing a coat that used to fit perfectly, but now it feels too tight. The coat hasn't changed. You've changed. Right? God, maybe you've been growing, and the Lord's saying, this is where you were, but this is where I want you to be. My husband jokes about him putting on his coats after summer and getting into them for winter. And believe it or not, in Florida it gets cold. We just left a snowstorm. And we got here. We had to escape a snowstorm. And so, but you put it on, you're like, try to zip it, right? But maybe your environment has become too limiting, okay? Number 6, your current position was never meant to be permanent. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one because I think this may resonate with some of you in here today. God brought you there for a reason and a season, but you settled and stayed too long. A temporary stopover has become a permanent habitation. In Genesis 11, we read, one day Terah took his son Abram and moved away from Ur to Chaldeans. He was headed for the land of Canaan, but then stopped at Haran and settled there. Terah lived for 205 years and died while still in Haran. Terah was called to Canaan, but he settled in Haran and died there. Sometimes we make a pit stop into a permanent address. You're on your way somewhere, you get off and get gas, and you never leave. And you were never meant to stay there permanently. God had another direction for you. How many of us are living in our Haran when God's calling us to Canaan? How many? I know I was, and I loved my pit stop. But the Lord said, come on, get back on the path. I'm taking you to Canaan. In Deuteronomy 1:6-7, God tells Moses, you have stayed at this mountain long enough. It's time to break camp and move on. That may be a word for some of you today, because that's what he was speaking to me. He said, it's time to break camp and you've got to move on. You've been there long enough and it's just time. Number 7, it's not the right fit anymore. So this one's hard, especially for creatives, in my opinion. We can get so attached to our identities and what we do that we keep trying to force ourselves into spaces we've outgrown. Maybe it used to fit, but you have outgrown it and you have changed, or it has changed, and it's just not working any longer like it used to. Or perhaps it was never a great fit, but you stuck it out, hoping something would change. I know for me, I started my business. I was excited for it. It wasn't fully what I expected. I made it fit. I made it work, but it was never the right fit. I learned a lot. I gleaned a lot, and I'm taking things with me along for the journey. But where I'm coming from to where I'm going, that I outgrew that. It's time, right? So maybe your season is in this current place, and that assignment is just really over. Ecclesiastes 3 tells us that there is a season for everything. Number 8, your current place has become damaging. Sometimes transitions are God's protection. Not every good beginning has a good ending, and that's okay. Sadly, not everything that starts well ends well. I know in the community of just the Christian community, there's a lot that's going on, right? We keep finding out about all kinds of things. And, maybe you started in a ministry or started somewhere and it started out well, but then it became unhealthy and you had to get out, right? So when Jacob and his 11 sons went to Egypt, you guys know the story, he had a lot of favor because of Joseph, and I mean, it was amazing. Like, they were in Goshen, it was awesome. However, years later, a new Pharaoh came in, and he completely forgot about Joseph and began to severely mistreat the Hebrews. And so what did God do? He raised up a deliverer. His name is Moses, and he delivered his people from oppressive and the abusive environment. Sometimes God's transitions you just because it is becoming too damaging or detrimental to your well-being to keep you there. And you got to go, baby, you got to go. A relationship has become abusive. A boss is badly mistreating you. A place has become too isolating. Of course, I'm not talking about leaving because something becomes too difficult or wherever you are is just too difficult. I'm not talking about that because I am the queen. Send on the challenge because I'm going to figure out how to get through it. I love working hard to figure out how to get things to work. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is like when things become harmful and damaging to your physical or emotional health to remain there. You need to move on, and you literally need to do whatever you can do. You must protect yourself and those that are under your care. You got to get out, okay? And then the last point is on knowing you're in transition is number 9, is simply just time to change. There's sometimes like no dramatic reason, okay? It doesn't have to be this big drama thing, you know. It's just time, and you can't argue with God's timing. I'm going to tell a story about my husband real quick. He worked for a really beautiful marketing firm, and he was putting in the hours. He was doing great. We had been on the mission field making peanuts. I love Caleb's story this morning. I'm like, I so relate. And we were pregnant with our 3rd child, the one that I just told you the name for, okay? And the Lord gave him a gift of getting a job in downtown Kansas City, and he loved it. However, it was not the right environment, and God had more for him. I knew that. We had just gotten the diagnosis for our son, our second born, autistic diagnosis, and there was a lot that was going on. And he had a friend that came up to him and said, hey, I feel like at the 3-year mark, the Lord's going to call you out of your job. Now, he was faithful. He was working hard. It wasn't the best environment. It was actually kind of toxic. He walked through a lot there. I came to him because right after we'd gotten the diagnosis with our son, now I'm pregnant with number 4. In all my stories, I'm always pregnant or nursing. Okay. And so I'm pregnant again, and I said to him, hey, I did not sign up in this marriage to be a single mom. You got to figure this out, because he was working early. He was the first one there, and he was the last one to leave. And there would be days that our children would never see their daddy. And I would scoop them up, drive all the way downtown so they could have a meal with their dad because they hadn't seen him in 3 or 4 days. Right? That is not healthy. There's seasons and times for that, but that was like a continual thing. And so we began to pray for a change. And truthfully, like, we had no idea what God was going to do, but we invited others to pray with us. And my husband worked on a project with a woman who was a CTO of another company, and I'm going to talk about stuff that I know nothing about. But anyway, they were programming something and some kind of code about something. And they worked it out to code it, and she had one coding thing, and he had another coding thing, and they were kind of at it about the coding thing, and they gained respect for each other regarding the coding thing. And this one was like in her 60s. So to be in tech in her 60s is like, I don't know, 15 years ago. It was like a big deal. And so he like got her respect, and she like got his respect. So there was a lot of respect. And that's all I know about this coding stuff, okay? And he's going through the fire at work. He's got a hot tamale at home as a wife. And so, you know, those things, plus I'm pregnant, so I was literally hot. I'm like always hot. And so, not that kind of hot. Hey, okay, maybe that hot. I don't know, let's stop talking about it. So she reaches out to him. I don't want to get the story wrong. She reaches out to him and says, hey, I got this job for you, and I want you to get it done. And she told him the amount, and it was half of his year's salary. I said, you better take that. And Ben, being the good, godly, faithful Mr. Steady, said no. And I was like, you're crazy, but okay. And so he told her, he said, hey, I'm not going to take it. And she said, yes, you are. And she gave it to him. And so, I mean, you know, thank God for her. You know, ironically, her last name is Miracle. We call her our miracle story. And what ended up happening was it was time for a change. And I'm married to a creative, okay? I mean, I'm like really married to a creative. When we got married, he told me, he said, you pick a color for the wedding and I'll pick a color for the wedding. What? And so that's not typical. So we picked a color and it worked out and he designed it. And, you know, he has a say in all that we decorate in our house. And I bless him for that. 20 years, we don't talk about decorating. He's laughing because he knows. That's on our podcast, by the way. If you want to listen to the podcast, it's a very funny story. But Miracle, she literally was the answer. And what it forced my husband to do and for us to do was to end something and step into something. And, you know, from that time, God has blessed his business, really. And ironically, at the same time as when I was starting my business. And ours just grew together, which is absolutely beautiful. So I love that story. As creatives, we face a unique challenge in transition. Like, let's talk about the parable of the talents. I talked about that when we were sitting up here. It's out of Matthew 25. And there's 5 talents, 2 talents, and 1 talent. And I think the biggest thing is that we want to steward what the Lord has given us. We don't want to just like squander it and bury it. We want to like be big, think big. We talk about, look at your 5 friends that are around you, right? Who are you hanging around? Are you hanging around big thinkers? Are you hanging around other artists that are like producing and getting excited? Are they 5 talent people? Or are they 1 talent people? Who are you around? And Justin shared earlier, he said, you know, you need to be careful who you're sharing your stuff with. I mean, Jesus talked about that. Don't show your pearls to swine. But you want to go after it. The Lord has given you the talent that you have. Even if you're sitting here and you're thinking, Liz, I don't feel like my talent is that big. Like you heard the panel up here. I mean, these people are, I was sitting up there. I was like, ay. I'm like, well, my kids do good in spelling. I mean, my chickens produce eggs. Like, I don't know. You know, but seriously, you may be sitting here going, I don't feel like I have it. I do want to say, if you don't feel like you're very clear on what your talent is, spend some time with the Lord and hear what he has to say to you and why he created you and put you on this earth. Hear what his purpose is for you. Spend time with him and get that clarity. And if you do have that clarity, please run. Please do not sit on your talent. Please get out there and produce. Do it. There is nothing wrong with it. It's beautiful. Be the one that the Lord comes and says, wow, you prospered. You doubled it. I want to get on the other side of eternity when the Lord is looking at me and he says, you used what I gave you. I want that. I don't want to just sit on it in false humility. I hate that. I hate it. Don't do that. Okay? The other thing is I talked a little bit about Elisha taking the arrows. And, you know, my oldest son is Elisha, so I love the name Elisha, you know, double portion and all the fun things. But, you know, the king came to him because he was going to war, but he told him pick up those arrows and strike the ground. And the king, like, struck how many times, guys? How many times? 3, right. He only struck a few times. They think 3. But why in the world did the king not strike more? And I've heard sermons on this all the time, but as I was thinking about this message and being here at the Creative Conference, it really was, he wasn't striking because of fear. He was fearful. He should have gone all in there in confidence of who he is and who God is and struck many times. And I know as creatives, we've been talking about this even from this morning. You've got to create the space. You need to have the plan, but you got to go after it. People are probably going to criticize you. You're probably going to get a weird look from your aunt. Okay? You're probably going to hear it if you're on socials, you know, all those kind of things, but keep striking the ground. Keep striking the ground and keep going for it. I love what was shared last night. Fear is a thief. And you have too many great things inside of you that have to be shared. No one else is going to sing your song. I mean, unless you like write it and then they sing it. You know what I'm saying? But you got a song to sing. You've got whatever the Lord has called you to create. And we're raising creatives, my husband and I. So what was my office became the music room. We bought a drum set. Oh, my God. I'm glad you're laughing. And it's our 10-year-old who's the drummer, and he just gets up there, and he's like, da, 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 da. You know, he's going to town. But we've created that space for the kids to get in there, create. I also dubbed that space as the art room. And so our daughter, Blaze, who's like incredibly talented with tactile things, She is up there creating. We created that space. So I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you to not bury them and keep striking the ground with the arrow. Steward it. That's what I want to say. So I love this story about this painter, and we were talking about it this morning. Her name is Isabella Trotter. Anybody ever heard of her, Isabella Trotter? Okay, I see. Yes. So she was born in the Victorian high society, England. This is like back in the 1800s, and she was incredible. She was naturally gifted as a painter, and she flourished as a student. Like, she was groomed, she was going to all the great schools, everything. However, her father died when she was a young teen, and that's serious because as a young woman, your father, your rock, passing away, that just like transforms you as a young lady. And that tragedy threw her literally into a life of lament and prayer. And so in her 20s, she felt called to work with the Algerian people. Now, you guys, I want you to think about this. She is a British, white, Caucasian woman from high society England going to basically Africa with Muslims. And when she got there, they didn't really speak the language. Like, she didn't. And so she felt called to work with them, and she gave up her life of comfort and leisure and put herself in almost certain danger to teach the Algerian people about God, using her artistic gift. And she was there for 40 years. In fact, she used to send home her journals to her parents, and they were lost, and then they were found, and you can go and I'm sure they're on display. But her calling wasn't changing as an artist. It was expanding. She was going from what she thought she would just make great art, that the Lord was giving her literally a mission. And I kind of want to expand that just a little bit, because some of you are called to the arts, but it's not just you in a studio painting. Some of you are meant to be like full circle, gospel, in with the people. I love that that Josh and Alice are doing their creative community. I think that's huge, because we even talked about it in the panel. We need community as creatives. And also, we need an outlet, not just in how we're doing it, but sometimes touching those that maybe may be a part of the mission of what God is calling us to. So it's about expanding. And then I know earlier I was talking about when you're creating, looking at it and saying it is good. And so even, I've had some opportunities since I just said that, where some people came and said some things to me, and I was like, that inner critic was talking, and I was like, it is good. It is good. And so I just wanted to put that little tidbit in there again, if you didn't hear that earlier, was just that the Lord was saying to me this week that when he was creating the heavens and the earth, when he was creating all the animals, when he created, Adam and then he made Eve, all those things, at the end of the day, he said it is good. And as creatives, when you are creating and you're looking at it, even if you don't 100% like it, say it is good. Because the wiring and the working that's going on in your mind and your heart and your spirit, man, and for your mind to hear you say it is good, there's just something that's beautiful. And it's also where we are mimicking what the Lord did. Like, I think that's also partnering with the Creator. So I just want to leave you with just a few questions, reflection questions. The first one is, which of these transition signs resonates most with you right now? Which of these transition signs resonates most with you right now? 2, what comfort zone might God be asking you to step out of? And 3, what talent have you possibly buried out of fear or comfort? I just want to say, on the other side of my transition, I've discovered something absolutely beautiful. My calling wasn't changing. It was just literally expanding. And I don't have it all figured out yet. We're figuring that out. But trading comfort for calling felt risky. And we've had this theme over this weekend about risk, especially last night. But God's wisdom became clear on the other side. And my obedience, I'm not tooting my own horn here. I hope I give you hope. But trust him. If you are in transition right now and he is saying these different things, trust him. It looks scary. It looks risky. It changed our financial trajectory. We had to have conversations that we hadn't had in 20 years about money, okay? Budgeting. I don't like that word either. Let's add that to the list of the words I don't like. Budget, okay? But we live in a budget now, and it's so good. But remember, what looks like foolishness to the world might just be God's wisdom in disguise. Your creative gifts are meant to grow and not stay buried. Your calling might be bigger than your current canvas. And that's it.